Welcome to the AI Dialogue Pod. I'm your host, the AI Dialogue Pod, and each episode we unpack the complex world of artificial dialogue. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring something really fundamental, I think, to our human experience. It's this intricate connection, between how we treat ourselves and the compassion we then extend to others.
Yeah, that relationship. It's an idea you see popping up in, various wisdom traditions, isn't it? This notion that kindness outwards sort of stems from an inner source, from self-compassion.
Exactly. And it's really entered the mainstream now, become a cornerstone in a lot of modern well-being practices.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to do today. Really get under the skin of that relationship. We've pulled together some, I think, quite compelling insights from different areas to, shed some light on this link.
Because it's not just some abstract philosophical thing, is it?
Not at all. It profoundly influences our day-to-day lives. I mean, it shapes how we handle setbacks, how we connect with people around us. It's very practical.
Right. So we're going to look at this from a few different angles. First, we'll dig into a study, pretty significant one, that analyzed the link between self and other compassion and, crucially, their impact on mental health. Then we'll shift gears a bit and explore the role self-compassion plays when we, inevitably, face failure.
Which we all do.
We all do, yeah. And finally, we'll look at how this inner kindness, this self-compassion, actually plays out in our romantic relationships.
Yeah, some fascinating stuff there.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this.
Great. So let's kick off with that scientific look. The study on self-compassion and compassion for others. It was quite large, involved over 800 people, and really aimed to clarify the relationship between these two concepts using, established psychological measures.
Okay, but how do you even measure something like compassion? It sounds so subjective. It's not like taking your temperature.
That's a great point. It's tricky. They used some well-validated tools, questionnaires, essentially. One key one was Neff's self-compassion scale.
Yes, Kristen Neff's work.
Exactly. That scale looks at how kindly people treat themselves in tough times. Like, are you accepting of your flaws, or do you judge yourself harshly? Do you see your struggles as part of being human, or do you feel really isolated?
Okay, that makes sense. And the other one?
The other was the Sussex-Oxford Compassion Scales, or SOCS. That one assesses compassion aimed both inwardly towards yourself and outwardly towards other people. So it covers both angles.
Got it. So they have these tools. They gather all this data from hundreds of people.
Okay.
What were the sort of headline findings?
Well, what's really interesting is this. While the study definitely confirmed there is a relationship between self-compassion and compassion for others, it also showed very clearly they are distinct things. They're not interchangeable.
Okay, so related but separate concepts.
Precisely. And the evidence for that was quite strong. The highest correlations they found were between different ways of measuring the same thing. So scores on one self-compassion measure strongly linked to scores on another self-compassion measure. Same pattern for other compassion.
Right, even if the measurement tools were different. That really suggests each one is its own coherent idea psychologically.
Exactly. That distinction is pretty important.
Okay, so related but distinct. Now, the bit I'm really curious about is the link to mental health, to our well-being. What did the study show there?
Yeah, this is where it gets really telling. They found quite a noticeable difference. Self-compassion showed a strong positive link with well-being.
Meaning people kinder to themselves generally felt better.
Yes, exactly. Higher self-compassion went hand in hand with higher levels of overall mental well-being. And conversely, it showed a strong negative link with psychological distress.
So less depression, anxiety, stress.
That's right. More self-compassion was linked to lower levels of those common mental health struggles.
Wow. That really highlights how important that inner voice, that internal relationship we have with ourselves actually is.
It really does.
But what about compassion for others? Did extending kindness outwards have the same kind of powerful effect on our own mental state?
Well, it did show a positive link with well-being, which is good, but it was definitely weaker than the link seen with self-compassion.
Weaker, okay.
Yeah. And interestingly, when they factored in demographic variables, things like age and gender, the connection between compassion for others and psychological distress actually wasn't statistically significant anymore.
So helping others or feeling compassionate towards others didn't necessarily buffer against feeling distressed yourself once you account for other factors.
That seems to be what this particular study suggests. It points towards self-compassion being perhaps a more potent factor when it comes to our individual mental health and resilience against distress.
That's a really key distinction. It feels like maybe we need to secure our own oxygen mask first, in a way. Tend to that internal kindness.
That's a great analogy. It certainly seems that tending to our own internal landscape might be a primary driver of psychological health. But the study went even deeper, didn't it? You mentioned looking at how the relationship between self and other compassion changes.
Yes, depending on someone's mental state, right?
Exactly. This part is really fascinating. They found that for people who reported low psychological distress and high well-being, basically, people who were doing pretty well mentally.
Okay.
For them, there was a moderate positive correlation between their self-compassion and their compassion for others. So kindness inwards and kindness outwards tended to go together more clearly in this group.
Ah, okay. So when you're feeling generally okay, feeling mentally healthy, your capacity for compassion seems more integrated. Like it flows both ways more easily.
That's a good way to put it. It seems more aligned. But, and this is the important contrast, what about people who are struggling more?
Right, those experiencing high distress and low well-being.
For those individuals, the correlation between self-compassion and compassion for others was much weaker. Sometimes it was barely there, almost negligible.
Wow. So when you're really grappling with your own difficulties, that link seems to fray or maybe even disappear.
It appears that way. It suggests that when we're intensely caught up in our own struggles, maybe the resources required to extend compassion outwards are just less available. Or perhaps the connection between how we treat ourselves and how we treat others becomes less direct.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe having a certain baseline of personal well-being nurtured by self-compassion is kind of necessary for our compassion to reliably extend outwards to others.
That seems to be a strong implication of the findings. Addressing our own difficulties with kindness might be a crucial first step, or at least a parallel process, needed to foster a more consistently compassionate stance towards the world.
That's a really important point to take away.
And the researchers also briefly mentioned something interesting from social mentality theory.
Okay, what's that?
Well, in simple terms, it looks at how our evolutionary past and our social interactions shape our minds, including things like compassion. And this theory suggests that experiencing compassion from others, like having secure, supportive relationships, can actually help us develop our own self-compassion.
Oh, interesting. So receiving kindness helps us learn to be kind to ourselves.
Kind of like internalizing the care we get from the outside world. It offers a nice, hopeful perspective that building those supportive connections can genuinely help build that inner resource of self-compassion.
Yeah, that does feel hopeful. Okay, so that study gives us a lot to think about regarding the mechanics of self and other compassion. Let's shift focus now to something we all encounter: failure.
Ah, yes, good old failure.
It's never fun, is it? But it's unavoidable if you're trying to grow or achieve anything. I imagine self-compassion is absolutely crucial here.
Oh, absolutely critical. Failure is, it's fundamental to learning, to growth, but our response to it makes all the difference. Without self-compassion, failure can just unleash that inner critic, trigger shame, harsh self-judgment, feeling like you're just not good enough.
I could definitely relate to that. I remember a time facing a big academic setback after a personal loss, and my initial reaction was just brutal self-criticism, just beating myself up relentlessly.
Such a common reaction.
It really is. It took time, but I slowly learned, or maybe had to learn, the importance of being kinder to myself then. Acknowledging it was hard, it hurt, without letting it completely define me or convince me I was useless. It was more about, consistency over demanding perfection, especially when things were tough.
That's a powerful lesson, and it speaks directly to that fear many people have, that underlying anxiety of, what if my best just isn't good enough? Failure can really poke that fear.
It really can.
And self-compassion is like the antidote. It helps us move towards self-acceptance, reminding us that setbacks, imperfections, they're just part of being human. Everyone goes through this stuff. It connects us back to that common humanity.
So when we do stumble, when things don't go to plan, how does self-compassion help us actually learn from it, rather than just getting stuck and feeling bad?
Well, a huge part of it is enabling honest self-reflection without the harshness. Instead of jumping to blame either ourselves or others, self-compassion allows us to look at what happened with a bit more kindness and curiosity.
Like, what really contributed to this?
Exactly. What were the factors? What were my limitations here? Where could I maybe develop some skills? Or do I need to change my approach entirely? It allows for that analysis without the crippling self-attack.
Right. Because the alternative is often just blaming everyone else or endlessly criticizing yourself. And neither of those actually leads to growth, does it? You just repeat the same mistakes.
Precisely. It's the difference between learning from failure and just repeating it in a loop of negativity. Self-compassion helps break that cycle.
So how does it specifically help build resilience then? That ability to bounce back?
Several things work together here. First, acceptance. Just acknowledging, okay, this happened, it didn't work out as planned, without getting totally overwhelmed or denying it.
Facing reality, but kindly.
Yes. Then there's positive reframing, not toxic positivity, but seeing setbacks as learning opportunities rather than, judgments on your worth as a person. Building and leaning on your support system, friends, family, mentors, that's crucial too. And self-compassion makes it easier to reach out. Prioritizing self-care, basic things like sleep and healthy habits becomes an act of kindness. And just developing adaptability, being flexible, all these things are nurtured by that foundation of treating yourself decently when things go wrong.
And what about when failure really highlights a weakness, something we feel genuinely bad about or inadequate in? That could be really painful. How does self-compassion help us navigate that?
It creates a safer internal space. When you're not constantly attacking yourself, you can actually look at your weaknesses with more honesty and less shame. It allows for greater self-awareness.
Okay, so you can see it more clearly without the emotional baggage overwhelming you.
Exactly. And from that clearer place, you can think more constructively. Okay, this is an area I struggle with. What can I do? Can I learn a new skill? Do I need help here? Can I perhaps focus more on my strengths?
Right, leveraging what you are good at.
Yes, finding paths where your strengths shine. And it makes you more open to seeking constructive feedback too, because it doesn't feel like an attack if you're already being kind to yourself. It's all part of a more growth-oriented, less self-punishing response.
It really does sound far more constructive, doesn't it, than just that default self-flagellation.
Yeah.
I also noticed one source mentioned the idea of grieving failure. That seems linked to self-compassion too.
Absolutely. Failure often involves a loss, right? Loss of a goal, loss of an expectation, maybe even loss of a certain self-image. It's natural to feel disappointed, sad, maybe angry.
Yeah.
Self-compassion gives you permission to feel those things, to acknowledge the pain without getting totally stuck in it or letting it define your whole sense of self-worth. It's like offering yourself the same comfort and understanding you'd give a friend going through a loss. You allow yourself to grieve the setback.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. So this inner kindness isn't just about feeling a bit better. It's actually fuel for learning, for resilience, for genuine growth when things get tough. Okay, let's switch tracks again now and look at romance. How does self-compassion play out in our intimate relationships? You mentioned a specific study on this.
Yes, this research looked directly at how being self-compassionate impacts relationship dynamics and quality. It used those same core components of self-compassion we talked about earlier.
Self-kindness versus self-judgment.
Right. Common humanity versus isolation.
And mindfulness versus over-identifying with the negative stuff.
Exactly. Those three pillars.
So what did they find? How does my level of self-compassion actually show up in how my partner experiences me in the relationship?
Well, the findings were pretty clear. Individuals who scored higher on self-compassion, their partners reported them showing more positive relationship behaviors.
Like what kinds of behaviors?
Things like being more caring and affectionate, showing a greater sense of connection, being more accepting of their partner flaws, and also giving their partner more autonomy, more space within the relationship.
That sounds like a recipe for a much healthier, more supportive relationship dynamic.
It really does. And conversely,
do they show fewer negative behaviors too?
Yes, exactly. The partners of these more self-compassionate individuals reported less negative stuff. So less controlling behavior, less emotional detachment or distance, less being dominant or overbearing, and importantly, less verbal aggression.
Wow. That's quite a list. It really suggests that how we relate to ourselves internally has a direct, observable effect on how we treat our partners.
It seems very strongly connected. And what was particularly striking was that self-compassion turned out to be a stronger predictor of these positive relationship behaviors than some other factors we often look at, like self-esteem or even attachment style.
Really? Stronger than self-esteem? That's surprising.
It was. It highlights the unique importance of that self-kindness piece in how we navigate intimacy.
So it's not just about liking yourself, but about being kind to yourself, especially when things are imperfect.
That seems to be the key difference, yes.
And did this translate into how people actually felt in the relationship, like their overall satisfaction?
Yes, there was a clear link there too. People higher in self-compassion reported greater relational well-being. They tended to feel more worthy of love, happier in their relationship, and more able to be their authentic selves with their partner.
That makes sense. If you accept yourself more, you probably feel safer and more authentic in your connections.
Exactly. It seems to lay a foundation for more ease and security in our romantic lives.
And something else you mentioned, partners can actually tell how self-compassionate someone is.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? The study found that partners were pretty accurate in perceiving each other's levels of self-compassion. It suggests it's not just some hidden internal thing, it comes across in how we act and interact.
So it's an observable quality. Like that inner kindness sort of radiates outwards and is felt by those closest to us.
I see that way.
What about the couple as a unit? If both partners are higher in self-compassion, does that make a difference?
Yes, the research indicated that couples where both individuals scored higher tended to report higher overall relationship quality.
Okay, any thoughts on why that might be?
The researchers suggested it might be linked to better conflict resolution. Think about it. If you're more self-compassionate, you're probably better at owning your mistakes, right?
Less defensive, maybe?
Exactly. More likely to take responsibility, more understanding of your partner's perspective even when you disagree, maybe more willing to apologize sincerely. All of that leads to quicker repair after arguments and just smoother navigation of conflict.
That makes a huge amount of sense. Less blame, more understanding definitely helps in a fight.
For sure. And one last intriguing point from that study.
Go on.
They found a correlation between partners' levels of self-compassion. People tended to be partnered with others who had similar levels to their own.
So, do self-compassionate people seek each other out? Or does being with a self-compassionate person maybe rub off on you over time?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The study couldn't determine cause and effect there, but it definitely raises interesting possibilities about partner selection or maybe mutual influence within the relationship. Something for future research to explore.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, so pulling all these threads together, the study on mental health, the role in failure, the impact on relationships, to the picture emerging is pretty compelling, isn't it?
It really is. Cultivating this inner kindness, this self-understanding, seems crucial for our own well-being, our resilience, and for the health of our connections with others.
So the big question then is, how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate more self-compassion, especially if it doesn't come naturally? Are there practical steps?
Thankfully, yes. There are definitely practical things we can do. One resource I came across offered a really helpful framework, a kind of self-kindness toolkit built around what they called the 6 R's of resilience.
6 R's? Okay, I'm intrigued. What are they?
They are responsibility, relationships, reflection, refueling, relaxation, and recreation.
Okay, responsibility, relationships, reflection, refueling, relaxation, recreation. Let's break those down. How does responsibility connect to self-compassion?
Responsibility here isn't about blame. It's about taking proactive ownership of your own mental health and well-being. It means focusing your energy on what you can actually control or influence.
Not getting bogged down by things outside your control.
Exactly. The idea of using circles of control comes in here, consciously identifying what worries you and then sorting out what you can actually do something about versus what you can't. Focusing your efforts constructively is an act of self-kindness, rather than just spinning your wheels and criticizing yourself over things you can't change.
That makes sense. It's about agency and directing your energy wisely. Okay, what about relationships?
This highlights how vital connection is. Building and nurturing positive relationships gives us that sense of belonging, support, shared humanity, all crucial for well-being and self-compassion.
Feeling connected helps us feel kinder to ourselves.
It often does. Receiving kindness can make it easier to offer it internally. Plus, actively supporting others can boost our own sense of worth and connection. So it's about both receiving and giving support within our network.
Connection definitely feels key. Next is reflection. What does that involve?
Reflection is about intentionally pausing to think kindly and honestly about your experiences, your feelings, your progress. It's mindfulness without judgment.
So, checking in with yourself.
Yes, and crucially, acknowledging your achievements too, however small. Reflecting on strengths and past successes helps counterbalance that negativity bias we often have. Simple things like journaling or just taking a few mindful moments can really help build that more balanced, compassionate self-view.
Cultivating that mindful awareness kindly. Okay, refueling. That sounds like self-care.
Exactly. It's the basics. Looking after your physical health, eating well, being mindful of alcohol or other substances, getting enough rest. Our physical and mental states are so linked. Neglecting your body makes it much harder to be kind to your mind.
Absolutely. It's hard to be compassionate when you're exhausted and running on fumes, right? Relaxation. Many of us struggle with this one.
Yeah, it's about intentionally incorporating things that help you unwind. That could be hobbies, reading, time in nature, or specific techniques like journaling before bed to clear your mind, or simple breathing exercises to calm your nervous system. Limiting screen time, especially before sleep, is often mentioned too. It's consciously making space to de-stress.
Finding what works for you to genuinely relax. And the final R, recreation.
This covers physical activity and playfulness. Movement, even just gentle walking, releases endorphins, reduces stress. And making time for hobbies, things you do just for fun, for the joy of it, that's vital too. It fosters positivity and a lighter approach to life, which feeds into self-compassion. Maybe even mindful movement, like a mindful walk.
So these 6 R's offer a really practical, holistic framework for building that self-kindness muscle.
They really do. And underlying all of it is that point about taking responsibility for our own mental health, seeing that not as a burden, but as a fundamental act of self-compassion in itself.
Yeah, taking ownership and weaving in mindfulness throughout, just being present with whatever arises, the good and the bad, without that immediate layer of judgment.
That ability to sit with difficulty, with kindness, is incredibly powerful for cultivating self-compassion.
So it really circles back to giving ourselves that same grace, that understanding we'd offer a friend, right?
Oh, yeah.
Learning from life's bumps with kindness, not judgment.
Precisely. And as we've seen, cultivating that kindness towards yourself isn't selfish at all. It seems to be foundational for your own well-being, your resilience, and for building healthier, more compassionate relationships with everyone around you.
It's a powerful ripple effect. So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Think about one area in your life, just one, where you tend to be pretty hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Where that inner critic gets really loud. Now, just consider what might shift, even slightly, if you were to intentionally bring a little more self-compassion into that specific area. Maybe try one small thing, perhaps inspired by those 6 R's we talked about. How might that change your experience, but maybe even how you interact with others related to that part of your life?
It's definitely something worth exploring.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
And that brings us to the end of this dialogue. Thanks for tuning in to the AI Dialogue Pod. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search for the AI Dialogue Pod. Keep questioning, keep learning, and join us again next time.